Welcome, chosen ones. You didn't stumble onto this video by accident. You were guided here, called here, drawn by a force greater than chance. Because the storm you've been facing is not random. It's a signal. It's a sign that something deeper is calling out to you. You are not ordinary. You are set apart for something higher. And the very fact that you're watching this means God is reaching for you right now. You've been chosen not because you're perfect, but because you're ready to awaken. So stay with me until the very end of this message. There is something waiting for you, a shift, a moment, a revelation that might just change your direction and deepen your faith in ways you never expected. Let's begin by diving into the heart of the journey you're on. The path of faith was never meant to be a smooth one. It's not the absence of storms that defines us. It's how we walk through them with divine guidance. That's where our character is shaped and our destiny revealed. As I reflect on what I've learned from the sharp edges of pain and the heavy weight of loss, I realize this truth more than ever: experience is a brutal teacher. But oh my God, how you learn. And that learning, that's where your spiritual depth begins to form. So let me ask you, have you ever felt like you were drowning not in water, but in doubt, in silence, in the unknown? Have you ever wondered why God would allow the winds to rage so fiercely around someone trying to walk in faith? You're not alone. That tension between belief and reality, between hope and hardship, that's exactly where something divine is being born. That's why this message matters and why you're meant to hear it right now. Now, if you're feeling this already, if something inside you is stirring, then I want to invite you to stay with me. Don't skip ahead. Don't click away. This message is going to go deeper than surface motivation. We're going to talk about how storms shape your spirit, how faith grows in silence, and how God speaks loudest in your pain. If you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button right now so you don't miss what's coming next. Tap that like button to let this message be seen by others who might be in a storm of their own. And if you're ready for a breakthrough, drop a 777 in the comments. Let it be your declaration of faith, your spiritual signal. We are about to begin your journey now. Pain doesn't always mean you're lost. In fact, it's often the first sign that you're exactly where you're meant to be. We've been conditioned to associate ease with success and struggle with failure, but that's not the economy of heaven. In God's design, pressure is not punishment. It's preparation. Hardship is not rejection, it's refinement. And the very storm you're praying to be released from may be the sacred instrument, carving your soul into something capable of carrying divine purpose. You see, comfort is a lovely companion, but it rarely produces anything of lasting depth. True strength is forged, not inherited. It is chiseled through conflict, sculpted by surrender, and tested in trials. Pain is not proof of divine absence. It is often evidence of divine investment. When God begins to shape something sacred within you, He doesn't start by softening the edges. He starts by striking the foundation, removing anything built on fear, illusion, or self-reliance. That shaking isn't cruelty, it's construction. When I wrote that hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny, I wasn't waxing poetic. I was bleeding truth through lived experience. The kind of experience that doesn't just stretch you, it undoes you. The kind that makes you question everything, until the only thing left standing is trust. And from the wreckage of those moments came revelation. I began to see that what I once called failure was actually formation. The detours I resented were actually directions from a higher wisdom. God was never careless with my pain. He was using it to shape something eternal in me, something that couldn't have been cultivated in the sunshine alone. Because real transformation doesn't come through convenience. It comes through confrontation, when your reality collides with God's refining hand. That's why obedience doesn't always make life easier. In fact, the closer you get to your calling, the hotter the fire becomes. You may begin to wonder why your prayers seem to be met with silence, why the attacks intensify the more you press into God. But maybe that's not a sign of abandonment. Maybe it's a confirmation that you're finally being trusted with weight. Fire doesn't fall on empty altars. Pressure doesn't crush what has no potential. Trials don't chase those who pose no threat to darkness. So, if your life feels pressed from every side, if the wilderness seems never-ending, know this: you're not being overlooked, you're being prepared. You're not being shelved, you're being shaped. The wilderness, for all its discomfort, is not a place of punishment. Oh, it's a classroom. And in that classroom, God teaches differently. He uses silence to deepen your listening. He uses stillness to develop your discernment. He allows the ache of longing so that when fulfillment comes, it doesn't inflate your ego, it humbles your heart. And when the breakthrough finally arrives, it doesn't just bless you, it anchors you. You're no longer swayed by the temporary, because you've been rooted in something eternal. That's the paradox of pain. It doesn't push you away from God, it often draws you closer. Not in theory, but in desperation. When everything else is stripped away and the only thing left to hold is His Word, you begin to discover it's enough. It's more than enough. You realize that faith isn't about understanding, it's about surrender. And surrender doesn't always feel like strength. Sometimes it feels like collapse. But that collapse is holy, that collapse is sacred. That is where the soil of your soul becomes soft enough for God to plant something new. Here's the truth that often goes unnoticed: storms don't just reveal what's wrong, they reveal what's strong. If your foundation is still holding in this season, that means something inside you has already been fortified. You may not feel strong, but survival is not weakness. Faith that has never been stretched is faith that cannot carry weight. And if you're being stretched now, it's because God is expanding your capacity to hold what He's about to entrust to you. Don't resent the stretching. Recognize it for what it is: sacred preparation. You haven't missed the mark, you're being molded. The chaos is not a sign that God has left you. It may actually be the cradle of the very calling you've been praying for. So instead of asking why the storm hasn't ended, begin asking what the storm is establishing. What is it clearing away? What is it planting in you that could never grow in the safety of comfort? What old identity is being stripped so that something stronger, something anointed, something eternal can take root? Because while the world sees pain as an obstacle, heaven often uses it as a launching point. The breaking is not the end, it's the beginning. You weren't built just for survival, you were built for glory. Not the kind that inflates ego, but the kind that reflects heaven. And glory doesn't come cheaply. It costs, it demands your yes when you want to run. It demands your praise when you feel empty. But what it gives in return cannot be shaken. Clarity, character, resilience, purpose. You're being shaped into someone who carries fire in your bones and peace in your voice. Someone who knows how to walk through the valley and still speak of promise. So, when it feels like too much, when the fire gets hotter, when the questions get louder, when the path grows lonelier, remember this: you are not being broken down, you are being broken open. And from that opening comes revelation, strength, humility, a trust that doesn't depend on the answer but rests in the presence. A trust that doesn't perform, it endures. That kind of trust moves heaven. That kind of faith is what God uses to change the world. And it's in you even now. Even through the fear, even through the ache, that seed of faith is still growing. The storm didn't kill it. The silence didn't bury it. It's alive. And soon it will bear fruit. Not just for you, but for others, because you won't walk out of this just healed. You'll walk out marked, commissioned, refined. With eyes that see clearer, with hands that heal deeper, with words that carry power. Not because they are loud, but because they have been forged in the fire. This is not the end of your story. This is the chapter where everything shifts, not because the pain disappears, but because you rise through it. Not because you get all the answers, but because you learn to trust the one who is the answer. You stop trying to avoid the fire and start understanding that it was never meant to destroy you, it was meant to reveal you. So don't curse the fire, don't resent the storm, lean into what it's forming. Because when it's over, and it will be over, you won't just be standing, you'll be transformed. You'll carry something sacred, and you'll know beyond any doubt that this storm didn't break you. It revealed you and the person it revealed. That's who heaven always saw. That's who God has been preparing, and that is who the world is about to meet. Not every storm is meant to sink you. Some are designed to steer you. What appears chaotic on the surface may actually be precision, underneath a divine recalibration, shifting you toward a purpose you never would have chosen on your own. That's the strange, sacred nature of disruption. While we see fragments, heaven sees blueprints. While we feel like things are falling apart, God is orchestrating something deeper, something that can't be built in ease, only forged through adversity. Storms don't just test you, they redirect you. There are seasons when everything you thought was solid begins to crumble. Relationships you counted on fall away. Plans you held tightly dissolve. Dreams you were sure of suddenly feel out of reach. In those moments, it's tempting to believe you failed, or worse, that God has abandoned you. But when I look back on the most disorienting seasons of my life, I don't see meaningless suffering, I see the beginning of clarity. I see moments when comfort was stripped away so that calling could finally surface. Because it's often in the low places, in the quiet valleys and lonely nights, where heaven's highest work begins. There is something sacred about being broken open. It's the space where you can no longer pretend, where every false identity and illusion of control is peeled away. And it's there, when you're stripped of what you thought made you strong, that God begins to build something unshakable. Not because you've mastered perfection, but because you've learned the power of surrender. The storm becomes a mirror. It shows you what cannot be shaken. It reveals the foundation beneath the facade. And what remains is real, raw, and ready for something greater. Most people miss this paradox. We've been trained to think that trials mean something is wrong, that if life hurts, then God must be distant, or we must have taken a wrong turn. But what if the trial isn't a detour? What if it's confirmation that you're finally aligned with something eternal? God doesn't reveal purpose in convenience. He reveals it in fire, in silence and stillness. When your plans collapse, when your expectations are crushed, when your strength runs out, that's when something sacred begins to awaken. And that awakening isn't a mistake. It's the beginning of a holy shift. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. As you mature in faith, you realize that hardship isn't just allowed, it's essential. There are lessons you can't learn in the light. There's strength you don't discover until the darkness demands it. Character, endurance, discernment. These aren't byproducts of ease. They're born in adversity. And when the storm passes, you realize you're not the same person who entered it. You're wiser, stronger, grounded, rooted in something deeper than emotion, anchored in truth that doesn't waver with the weather. This shift begins when you stop viewing difficulty as a disruption and begin seeing it as divine development. Trials aren't your enemy. They're often exposing what truly is. Fear, pride, control, idols we've clung to silently. Pain has a way of surfacing what's been suppressed, but not to shame you, to heal you. Discomfort is God's invitation to deeper freedom. And in that classroom, the lesson becomes unmistakable. Your limits are not the place of defeat. They are the place where God begins to rebuild. Faith isn't pretending everything is fine. It's standing in the middle of the storm and refusing to let go. Faith doesn't deny reality. It declares a deeper one. It says, what I see now is not all there is. What I feel now is not final. That's not just poetic. It's spiritual survival. The moment you feel like giving up is often the threshold of breakthrough. The enemy always increases pressure right before the promise, right before clarity, right before the birth of something sacred. So when you feel like everything is tightening, don't run, don't retreat, press in, because something is being birthed in this moment. Victory doesn't begin when the storm ends. It begins when you surrender in the middle of it, when you say, even if I don't understand, I trust you. That kind of surrender shifts things in the spirit. It realigns your heart not with outcomes, but with God Himself. And in that place, peace begins to grow, not from resolution, but from presence. The presence of a God who never wastes pain, who never loses sight of you, who never stops shaping you into the person you were created to become. Through my own storms, I've discovered this truth. Not a single struggle is meaningless. Every unanswered prayer, every sleepless night, every moment of confusion is being woven into a larger design. And though the pattern may feel chaotic, the thread is always redemption. The winds that threaten to take you down are now the winds lifting your wings. What once felt like fire is refining you into gold. The detour you resented is the path that brought you to the threshold of destiny. You're not being undone, you're being redefined. The shaking isn't breaking you, it's revealing what's unshakable. And if you still have breath, it means God is still building. You may not see the full picture yet, but your spirit already feels the shift. Something is stirring beneath the surface, a new strength, a deeper resolve, a fresh fire. The ground might still be shaking, but the foundation is being reinforced. You are not forgotten, you are being formed. This is what heaven does with storms. It doesn't just bring you through them, it uses them to elevate you, to awaken what was dormant, to expose what was hidden, to prepare you for what's next. The next level of calling, the next chapter of clarity, the next expression of glory. So stay steady, stay rooted, hold the line when it's hardest, because what's coming isn't just survival, it's resurrection. And when the skies finally clear, you'll look back and understand. It was never meant to destroy you. It was always meant to direct you. It didn't break your purpose. It revealed it. You were never off track. You were being realigned. The storm didn't take your future. It revealed the strength already rising inside you to carry it. This isn't the end. It's the holy beginning of who you were always meant to be. Faith doesn't always arrive with trumpets and light. More often, it walks in quietly when everything else has fallen apart. Sometimes it doesn't feel like courage. It feels like barely breathing. It feels like holding your breath in the dark, unsure whether the next step will hold or collapse beneath you. In my darkest hour after the death of my beloved wife, I wasn't surrounded by spiritual clarity. There was no sudden peace or vision. What surrounded me was absence, hers, mine God's, or at least that's how it felt. And yet, even as everything around me crumbled, there was a small flicker within that would not die, a stubborn trust that refused to go out. That season gave birth to a grief observed not as a guidebook for others, but as a mirror for myself. I wasn't trying to offer solutions, I was writing out of the ashes, grasping for something solid, while everything familiar turned to dust. And in that unraveling, I stumbled onto a truth that would shape my entire view of faith. It is not the absence of pain, but the insistence on trust in the middle of it. Faith isn't proven in the calm. It is revealed in the chaos. When the world offers no answers and God seems silent, faith is the whisper that chooses to say, I still believe. There's a particular line from that book that continues to speak to those in the midst of their own loss. We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be. That line wasn't written to be clever. It was written to be honest, because real faith doesn't shy away from the hard questions. It brings them bruised and unfiltered to the feet of God. And even when the answers don't come, the relationship remains. Faith is what survives long after understanding is gone. Spiritual depth isn't birthed in clarity. It's carved in confusion. When grief grips your chest and the prayers go unanswered, when the silence of God stretches longer than you imagine, and yet you still turn your face toward heaven that is sacred. That is the space where faith is refined, not with certainty but with surrender. I found in those moments that God does not always answer with explanation. Sometimes He answers with presence, and presence, I've learned, is more powerful than clarity. You don't need all the reasons when you know you are not alone. Even in the ache of loss, I could not deny God's goodness, not because I could see it clearly then, but because I had encountered it before. My memory of Him carried me when my emotions could not. And that's often how faith works. It borrows strength from what you knew was true in the light, to hold you through the night. That's why I say the grief didn't dismantle my belief. It reshaped it. It stripped it of platitudes and polished answers, and gave it something far more enduring: authenticity. The kind of belief that limps but keeps walking. There is something holy about standing in the ruins and still saying, "I trust you." Not because it's easy, not because you feel strong, but because you've reached the end of your own strength, and the only thing left is the quiet decision to believe. That kind of faith doesn't show up in songs or sermons. It shows up in silence. It sits with you in the dark. It doesn't lecture, it holds your hand. And in those moments, you come to understand that God isn't waiting for you on the other side of pain. He's already sitting in it with you. Grief, I've learned, is not a sign of faithlessness. It is a space where faith is refined. To lose someone or something you love and still find the will to stand to speak. To hope, that's grace. That's divine strength. Not loud or flashy, but deeply rooted. It doesn't shout victory, it whispers, "I'm still here." And sometimes that's all heaven needs to hear. Pain has a way of peeling back our illusions of control. It reveals how fragile we are, how dependent we've always been. And yet, in that dependency, something unexpected grows: surrender. Not the kind that gives up, but the kind that lets go. That stops demanding answers and starts trusting the character of the one who holds them. The kind of trust that doesn't rush the process, that waits, that listens, that remains. It is this kind of faith, not loud, not certain, but loyal, that heaven honors most. If you are walking through a season of sorrow, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not lost. You are being led. You are not abandoned. You are being drawn close. And what feels like the breaking point may be the beginning of a deeper knowing, a quieter confidence that can't be taken from you. You are not broken beyond repair. You are being reshaped. What the enemy meant to destroy you is becoming the very material God will use to rebuild something sacred in you. God does not waste grief. He meets you in it. And if you allow it, sorrow will not be the end of your story. It will be the soil where faith grows stronger, where love goes deeper, where trust becomes real. The darkness is not your destination. It's where resurrection begins. And sometimes, it's only when everything falls away that we finally see the light we missed before. God doesn't abandon us in the valley. He builds altars there. And from those altars, worship rises, not from perfection, but from the honest cry of a soul that still believes. It is not easy. It never was meant to be. But it is beautiful. There is no richer intimacy than the kind forged through fire. No greater clarity than the kind revealed through tears. When the lights go out and the voice is quiet, what remains is the only thing that truly matters. The unwavering nearness of a God who is never absent, even when He is silent. That is the lesson I carry. That is the story I live. Not of a man who never questioned, but of one who questioned everything and still chose to stay. not because I had answers, but because I had encountered presence. And sometimes that is enough. Not because it erases the pain, but because it reframes it. And in that reframing, something unshakable is built. So if your heart is breaking, if your prayers feel unanswered, if you are walking through shadows deeper than words can express, know this: you are not alone. You are not without hope. The silence is not empty. It is sacred. And in that silence, God is not retreating. He is rebuilding slowly, tenderly, faithfully. And one day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even soon, but one day you will rise from this. You will stand in the same place where you once crumbled, and you will speak with the authority of someone who has walked through fire and found not only healing, but wholeness. That day will come, and when it does, you'll understand. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of the version of you that only grace could build. He was the kind of young man most people overlooked, not because he lacked value, but because the world had already labeled him a failure. His clothes were worn, his words uncertain, and his presence often dismissed. Even among those who knew him, he carried the reputation of being the least likely to succeed. He wasn't the star student, he wasn't the confident leader, he was simply the one left behind. And for a long time he believed what they said about him, that he would never amount to anything, that nothing good could possibly come from someone like him. But what no one saw was what heaven had already written. Purpose wrapped in pain, a calling buried beneath rejection. His journey was marked by hardship from the beginning. He lost both parents at a young age and was passed from one relative's house to another, always feeling like an outsider. No one seemed willing to carry his burdens, and he learned quickly to carry them alone. There were nights when hunger kept him awake, not just the kind that gnaws at the stomach, but the hunger for love, for stability, for meaning. When school became impossible, he dropped out. When work seemed unreachable, he settled for whatever odd jobs came his way. Every step forward felt like dragging a weight no one else could see. And worst of all, he began to believe that God had forgotten him, that maybe there was no plan for someone like him. But then something shifted. It wasn't a miracle in the traditional sense. There was no booming voice from heaven, no sudden wealth or fame. It was just a dream, simple, quiet, but undeniable. In that dream, a man stood before him and spoke with clarity and authority. God sees you. God has not forgotten you. God is calling you into something new. He woke up trembling, not with fear, but with a sense of urgency. Something inside him broke open. A door he didn't even know existed had cracked just enough to let the light in. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, he hoped again. The next morning, he sought out someone to talk to. Not a preacher or prophet, just someone who would listen. He shared the dream, his doubts, his failures, and the quiet sense that maybe his life could still hold meaning. That conversation didn't erase the pain, but it reminded him he wasn't alone. More importantly, it reminded him that surrender isn't weakness. It's the beginning of transformation. So he made a decision not to fix everything overnight, but to give his life back to the one who created it. He chose faith not because it was easy, but because he had tried everything else and nothing had worked. And sometimes the end of your strength is where grace begins to rebuild you. As days passed, small shifts began to occur. He started attending night prayer meetings, not seeking miracles, but seeking peace. Slowly, the darkness began to lift. He found a job not glamorous but steady. It gave him a sense of dignity, a daily rhythm, and the ability to take care of himself. He began forming relationships with people who spoke life into him, not condemnation. Encouragement replaced shame. Belonging replaced isolation. He was no longer the boy who was tossed aside. He was a man in the process of becoming. What changed was not just his circumstance, it was his identity. He no longer saw himself through the lens of failure, but through the eyes of grace. He understood now that his past did not disqualify him. In fact, it prepared him. The rejection, the poverty, the ridicule, they had all shaped a heart that was ready to receive purpose with humility. And that purpose wasn't just for survival, it was for impact. He began to share his story not out of pride, but as a testimony of what God can do when someone stops running from brokenness and starts walking toward redemption. This is what I've come to believe about transformation. It doesn't always begin with blessings. Sometimes it begins with breaking, but in the hands of God, nothing broken is ever wasted. The dream that young man had was more than a message. It was a divine interruption, a reminder that heaven speaks in ways the world cannot predict, that spiritual awakening doesn't wait for perfection. It finds you in the mess, and when it does, everything begins to shift. When I think of that young man, I don't see a cautionary tale. I see a miracle in motion. I see someone who went from being defined by others' opinions to being shaped by God's promise. His life is living proof that purpose is never too far gone, that no matter how deep the valley, there is always a path upward when faith is the guide. He didn't rise because the world gave him a second chance. He rose because he gave his heart to the one who never stopped believing in him. So, if you feel buried today under failure, under shame, under fear, remember this: you're not buried to be forgotten. You're being planted. And in time, if you stay rooted in surrender, you will rise. The life ahead of you may not look like the one you planned, but it will be the one you were born for. And when it comes, it will not only restore what was lost, it will reveal who you truly are. That's what grace does. It doesn't just rescue, it rebuilds, it redefines, it reawakens the divine spark in the soul that once believed it had no light left to give. There's a tenderness in divine severity that the human heart often misunderstands. When I said the hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men, I wasn't trying to be poetic. I was telling the truth from a place of lived sorrow and honest revelation. The kindness of people, though well-intentioned, often shields us from pain, but also from growth. It comforts but doesn't always confront. It soothes but rarely transforms. God's love, on the other hand, doesn't simply ease your discomfort. It reshapes your life. And to do that, it often has to break through layers of resistance we've built to protect ourselves. Real love, the kind that saves us, is not passive. It wounds to heal, it disrupts to realign. It exposes what we try to hide, not to shame us but to set us free. That young man's life didn't change because someone was nice to him. It changed because God allowed the discomfort to go deep enough that he could no longer pretend he was okay. Pain was the doorway, not the destination. The kindness of God did not come wrapped in comfort. It came in truth. And truth, when it cuts through denial, feels hard, but it is healing. It doesn't speak to make us feel good. It speaks to make us whole. That's the contradiction many never learn to embrace. We crave a God who rescues, but what we're given is a God who refines, one who would rather let us walk through fire than let us stay stuck in illusions, one who sees what we can become and won't settle for less, even when we do. The young man's transformation didn't begin when life became easier. It began when life became unbearable, and he turned toward a love that was firm but faithful. That's when the process of becoming started. That's when the deeper mercy took hold. The hands of God are not always soft, but they are always safe. His correction is never cruel. His discipline is not rejection. It is rescue in disguise. When I look at my own grief, I see now that God did not spare me from sorrow, but he did use it to strip away what was shallow in me. And in that space, something sacred emerged. This is the mystery of divine love. It will not coddle you into comfort, it will carve you into truth. And in that carving, even when it feels like pain, you are being shaped for something eternal that to me is a kindness this world could never give. Transformation is never just about changing your circumstances. True healing goes deeper. It rebuilds the inner landscape of the soul. That young man's story didn't end with getting a job or securing a place to live. Those were meaningful milestones, yes, but they were not the miracle. The greater work was invisible to the human eye, unfolding quietly beneath the surface. It was the restoration of identity, the return of dignity, and the rebirth of a calling he never knew he carried. His outer reality began to shift only after the inner repair had taken place. And that's the pattern of divine transformation. It always begins on the inside. Before his encounter with God, the weight he carried was not just financial lack. It was shame buried deep. It was fear taught by trauma. It was the ache of years spent believing he didn't matter. Rejection had hardened parts of his heart, not out of rebellion, but out of protection. People around him couldn't see it because pain often wears a mask. He learned how to survive while silently unraveling inside. But there's one who never misses what man overlooks. God saw the broken places no one else noticed. And when the young man finally laid his defenses down, when he surrendered, that's when true healing began. Not just in his situation, but in his soul. The first thing God restored wasn't his finances, it was his name. He no longer had to live under the shadow of others' opinions. He began to walk with a different posture, not of arrogance, but of assurance. He knew now that he belonged not just to a support group or a circle of encouragement, but to a kingdom, a spiritual family. One not built on performance or perfection, but on grace and belonging. He was no longer a stranger or an outsider. He was home. That truth changed everything. There's something extraordinary that happens when a person discovers they are wanted, not tolerated, not pitied, wanted. When love isn't earned but extended. When your value isn't based on what you do, but on who you are. That young man didn't clean himself up to be accepted. He was accepted, and through that, he was made clean. Grace didn't wait for perfection, it offered presence. And in that presence, he discovered he was no longer who others said he was. He was not forgotten. He was not disqualified, he was called. This is the kind of healing that doesn't just fix habits or behaviors. It rewrites identity. It alters the internal script, the quiet narrative that shapes how we see ourselves. What grace does is interrupt that narrative. It silences shame. It removes the old labels and it whispers something new, something true, something holy. That whisper becomes a melody, and over time, it becomes the rhythm of your life. That's what happened to the young man. He started living from truth instead of reaction. He began responding to God instead of chasing approval, and everything changed. I once wrote that pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. That truth has proven itself again and again. It was through pain that I first heard God clearly, not as a theory, but as a presence. Pain has a way of stripping away what doesn't matter. It removes distractions, it humbles pride. It forces us into silence, and in that silence, God speaks. When all else fades, what's left is the sacred space where healing begins. That young man didn't run from that space. He leaned into it, and that leaning, that surrender was the doorway to restoration. His healing wasn't instant. It was gradual, but it was unmistakable. Over time, something shifted. His words became more thoughtful. His steps became steadier. His heart became softer. His confidence wasn't rooted in what he had, but in who he had become. He didn't just find employment, he found joy. He found peace. He found a reason to keep going, not because his life became perfect, but because his spirit had been made whole. He knew who he was now, and that changed how he moved through the world. The greatest miracle wasn't what others could see. It was what he knew deep within. He no longer needed validation from those who once rejected him. He stopped trying to prove he was enough. Grace had already declared that he was. That's what spiritual healing does. It redefines your worth at the source. It doesn't ask you to earn anything. It invites you to live from what's already been given. And once you've experienced that nothing else satisfies, he wasn't simply restored to the person he was before the pain. He was reintroduced to the person he was always meant to be. Not broken, not invisible, not forgotten, but beloved. Handcrafted by God, seen, known, chosen. The boy the world dismissed was the man heaven had never taken its eyes off. And now, with that truth rooted in him, he didn't just live, he led. He didn't just recover, he rose. He took the pain that once silenced him and turned it into a voice of wisdom and compassion for others. He became more than a story. He became a vessel, not perfect but ready to carry something bigger than his own success, ready to point others to the same grace that transformed him. His life became a testimony, not just of change, but of redemption, not just of survival, but of spiritual resurrection. His wounds became wisdom, his struggle became his strength, and through it all, God was glorified not because everything had gone smoothly, but because everything had been surrendered. That's what divine restoration looks like. It's not a quick fix. It's a complete renewal. It doesn't just cover the cracks. It rebuilds the foundation. It doesn't remove the past. It reclaims it. The very things that once disqualified you become the very evidence of God's grace. The ashes become the altar, and from that altar rises a life that no longer needs applause to feel valuable because it already carries heaven's approval. That is the kind of healing that changes everything. That is the kind of story God is still writing. And it is still available to anyone at any time who is willing to lay down the old story and trust the hands of the author who knows how to write something far more beautiful, something eternal, something redeemed. Storms do not last forever, even though they often convince us otherwise. They howl, they threaten, they blind us with fear, but they are temporary visitors. Their arrival may be loud and disruptive, but they are not eternal. What is eternal is the hand guiding us through them. What is unshaken is the presence of God, who never leaves in the chaos and never forgets his promise, just because the wind is howling. If your life feels surrounded by thunder right now, if the noise of fear or failure seems louder than your hope, hear this. Something new is being prepared behind the scenes. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but beneath the noise, a divine plan is unfolding. Breakthrough is on the way, not because you've done everything right, but because God is faithful. This is not wishful thinking or shallow optimism. This is the unshakable hope rooted in divine promise. In Isaiah 43:19, the words are clear, weighty, and present. Behold, I am doing a new thing. It is not a vague encouragement. It is a declaration from the Creator himself. And the most profound part of this verse is not the miracle itself. It's the timing. Now it springs forth. Not someday in the distant future. Not when your life looks put together. Not when the chaos calms. Now in the midst of confusion. In the center of contradiction. While the winds are still roaring, something new is already being planted beneath the surface. Most people think God waits for order before he moves. But God doesn't wait for peace to begin his work. He creates peace in the middle of disorder. That's who he is. He doesn't speak to calm seas. He speaks while the waves rage. He doesn't wait for your readiness. He moves when your heart is positioned in surrender, even if your hands are trembling. Divine transformation doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives quietly but with undeniable power. It begins in the unseen and then reshapes everything it touches. New doesn't always mean different in appearance. Sometimes it means renewed in depth and purpose. God doesn't just swap your circumstances, He resurrects them. What looked dead in your life, what felt finished or wasted, is not beyond the reach of His redemption. What seemed hopeless can still bloom. And the most beautiful part of divine renewal is this: it often uses what was broken as the foundation for what will be glorious. God doesn't waste anything. Grace doesn't discard. It rebuilds. It reclaims. And when God says He is doing a new thing, it's not a minor improvement. It's a transformation so complete. It shifts how you see yourself and how the world sees you. I've seen this not just in theology but in real lives. Lives once crushed by despair that became living testimonies of hope. People who had no reason to believe suddenly walking in faith. Families torn by conflict now restored and stronger than ever. Dreams long buried under disappointment suddenly taking root again. That's what happens when God breathes on something. When He whispers a new beginning, it doesn't just restore what was lost, it multiplies it. That's the rhythm of God's redemptive work. It always starts small, a whisper, a stirring, and then erupts into undeniable change. And the shift often begins not in the wind dying down, but in the soul standing still long enough to hear His voice. I remember my own seasons of silence, of wilderness, where nothing seemed to make sense, when pain clouded perspective and loss felt final. It would have been easy to believe that the darkness had the final word, but time and time again, God proved otherwise. What I thought was the end turned out to be the threshold. What I assumed was loss became the doorway into something deeper. It's in those painful seasons that we learn to surrender, not as a sign of defeat, but as a position of trust. And that surrender makes space for God to do what only He can: take ashes and make beauty. You may feel unsettled right now. You may sense a restlessness you can't explain. That's not failure, that's movement. That's your soul responding to the gentle pull of God, shifting you away from what was and into what will be. The things that no longer fit are being loosened. The beliefs that once defined you are being re-examined. The identity that was shaped by pain is being reformed by promise. You are not being undone. You are being redefined. And the dry, barren places of your life, the ones you stopped believing could change, those are the exact places He is watering. Those are the places where fruit is about to grow. This kind of renewal doesn't leave you the same. It doesn't allow you to return to normal. It marks you. It changes how you move through the world. It gives you new eyes to see, a new voice to speak, a new fire in your bones. It transforms you not just for yourself but for others, because the renewal God is bringing is not just for you. It's meant to ripple outward. Your story becomes someone else's anchor. Your breakthrough becomes someone else's roadmap. Your scars become signs of His glory. So stay ready, not in fear but in faith. Don't wait with anxiety. Wait with expectation. Speak the promise aloud. Declare it over your situation even when it seems impossible. Remind your soul daily, God is doing something new in me. Say it until your thoughts align. Say it until your heart believes, because faith doesn't wait for evidence. It rests in assurance. It holds to truth, even when the facts haven't changed. And when you live like that, something shifts. The storm loses its voice. The fear loses its grip. And what once felt like an ending becomes a beginning. This is not just motivation, it's divine preparation. The new thing is not a dream, it's a destiny, and it's closer than you think. What your storm was trying to bury, God is about to resurrect. What your past tried to define, God is about to rewrite. You are not stuck. You are not finished. You are on the edge of something sacred. So keep standing, keep listening, keep believing. The clouds may still be thick, but light is breaking through. And very soon, you will step into the moment that every storm, every loss, and every delay was preparing you for all along, not just as a survivor, but as a vessel of new glory. That is the promise, and it's already beginning now. Miracles aren't interruptions of nature. They are reminders of a deeper order that has always existed beneath what we can see. I once wrote that miracles are simply a retelling in small letters of the very same story that is written across the whole world in letters too large for some of us to see. And I believe that now, more than ever, what we call miraculous is not rare to God. It is simply the unveiling of how His reality has always been working beneath ours. It's the collision of heaven's rhythm with our broken patterns. It is not magic, it is mercy. Mercy breaking through the monotony of our ordinary moments to say, your story isn't finished. Too often, we pray as though God is limited by our expectations. We ask for just enough to survive the day, when all the while God is preparing more than enough to transform us completely. We hope for escape, while heaven offers elevation. We want relief, and God offers renewal. That's the tension between our perspective and His. And that's why so many miss the fullness of what God wants to do, because we've settled for improvement when He's offering resurrection. God doesn't work in half measures. He doesn't patch what's broken. He rebuilds it all together. He's not interested in making your life slightly more manageable. He's in the business of making you completely new, body, mind, and spirit. If your faith only reaches for the possible, you will miss the invitation to the supernatural. The power of miracles doesn't begin with results. It begins with belief. And that belief, that expectation that something greater is already being prepared, shifts everything inside you even before anything around you has changed. This is where the mystery of faith unfolds. Miracles often begin in unseen places inside the heart, within the will, beneath the surface of what the eye can perceive. And in that space, you are called to believe before you see, to praise before you receive, to trust before you understand. That kind of posture is what moves heaven, not because it manipulates God, but because it aligns you with Him. Faith, after all, is not a tool to control outcomes. It is the lens through which we begin to see God's hand at work. Even in the silence, faith does not ignore reality. It simply refuses to be defined by it. A diagnosis may be true, but so is healing. A loss may be real, but so is restoration. When you live by sight alone, you remain confined to what is visible. But when you live by faith, you begin to perceive the greater truth that God is always working, especially when it feels like nothing is happening. That tension between what you see and what you know is sacred. It's the very space where miracles take shape. Healing isn't just the disappearance of sickness. Restoration isn't just the return of what you lost. Divine transformation is the total reordering of who you are and how you live. It is learning to see differently, to speak with authority, to walk with peace, even when the storm still rages. This is not emotional escapism. It is spiritual clarity. It is rooted not in how much you know, but in how deeply you trust the one who does. You begin to declare God's goodness in the middle of grief. You begin to recognize grace in the gaps. And it's that kind of faith, the quiet, steady kind, that opens the door to the miraculous. The most powerful change isn't always what happens around you. It's what shifts inside you while you wait. What you believe while you're still in the middle of the uncertainty determines how you experience the outcome. If you wait in fear, even a miracle may feel temporary. But if you wait in expectation, even the smallest signs become sacred. The sunrise becomes a message. A door opening becomes an answer. The whisper you once dismissed becomes a declaration of destiny. That is how faith reorients the world, not by forcing God to act, but by training your heart to see that He already is. Praise in this way becomes more than music. It becomes a weapon, a bold stance against discouragement and delay. When you praise before the miracle arrives, you aren't pretending, you're prophesying. You're declaring that God's promises are more real than your present pain, that His word is more final than your current reality. And when you thank Him while the door is still closed, you're not being naive. You're building a foundation of trust so deep that no outcome can shake it. This kind of expectation is not blind optimism, it is bold confidence. Not in your ability to figure it out, but in God's ability to fulfill His purpose. It is trusting that He knows what you don't, that He sees what you can't, and that even when you're waiting, He's already moving. Miracles don't begin when they show up. They begin when your heart is ready to recognize them. And here's the truth. Most people overlook miracles don't always look like what you prayed for. Sometimes the answer is different but deeper. You asked for one thing and God gave you something that seemed unrelated, until months later when you realize it was exactly what you needed. That's the beauty of God's ways. They are not predictable, but they are perfect. And if you remain open, even your unmet expectations can become sacred ground. For revelation, the miracle is not on hold. It's not waiting for you to get everything right. It's already in motion. The real question is, will you recognize it when it comes in an unexpected form? Will you trust the gift, even when it doesn't look like the request? That is what faith does. It doesn't just ask for miracles, it prepares the heart to be changed by them. So raise your expectation. Don't just ask for improvement. Expect rebirth. Don't just hope for relief, anticipate renewal. Don't just wait for the end. Start praising in the middle, because every moment of surrender, every act of obedience, every word of worship is preparing the soil for something holy to rise. The same God who raised what was dead is breathing into the forgotten places of your story, and what's coming is not just a response to your prayer, it is the fulfillment of your purpose. That is not just a possibility, that is the miracle already on the way. Faith is not a mood, it is not a fleeting feeling that rises with the sun and disappears with the rain. It doesn't ebb and flow with your emotions, nor does it vanish when things don't go your way. Faith is a decision, a deep-rooted conviction to trust what is true, even when nothing around you confirms it. It is not built on comfort, it is built on commitment. Faith is not blind optimism, it's not hype. It is not pretending that everything is okay when it isn't. Real faith, the kind that moves the heart of God, is something far deeper and stronger. It is the unwavering choice to believe that God is who He says He is, even when life offers no supporting evidence. I've lived long enough to know that emotions are inconsistent. They're beautiful companions but terrible leaders. Feelings will inspire you one day and abandon you the next. That's why I once wrote, feelings come and go, but they cannot be our regular spiritual diet. You can't build a life of enduring faith on how you feel. You must build it on what you know, on truth, on the unchanging character of God. Faith doesn't wait for clarity. It begins with surrender. It steps forward not because the path is clear, but because God is good. It learns to love Him not only for what He gives, but for who He is. This is why faith has power, not because it denies pain, but because it redefines it. Faith doesn't say, I don't feel pain. It says, pain doesn't get the final word. Faith says, yes, the storm is raging, but I know the voice of peace will rise above it. It says, I may feel alone, but I know heaven still sees me. This kind of faith is not born in comfort. It is formed in silence. It is shaped in long seasons when answers are delayed, when prayers feel unanswered, when strength is tested to the limit. Real faith doesn't emerge in the celebration. It is birthed in perseverance. If you've been walking through a dark season, you're not alone. And the darkness doesn't mean your faith has failed. Quite the opposite. The fact that you're still holding on, even if barely, means your faith is still alive. It might be trembling, it might be quiet, but it's still burning. That small flame is powerful. God doesn't ask for a faith that never wavers. He asks for a faith that refuses to quit, that keeps showing up, that refuses to walk away. He honors a faith that stays, especially when staying is hard. There is a kind of faith that doesn't shout from the mountaintop but whispers through clenched teeth. I will not let go. It's not loud, it's loyal, it's not flashy, it's firm. It doesn't demand understanding. It declares allegiance. And when you hold on like that, you're not just surviving, you're becoming. Faith is not passive, it is active surrender. It leans into mystery not with panic, but with purpose. It trusts even when it trembles. That is the faith that pleases God. What many forget is that spiritual strength doesn't come from emotional highs. It comes from discipline, from daily choices, from the quiet consistency of saying, I still believe even when belief costs you something. It comes from opening your Bible, not because it feels inspiring, but because your soul needs truth more than it needs comfort. From showing up in prayer, not because the heavens are open, but because you trust the one who hears you, even in the silence. That consistency, small faithful steps day after day, produces endurance, and endurance opens the door to everything God has promised. Faith doesn't create a perfect life. It creates a faithful heart, one that endures pain without being destroyed by it, one that walks through valleys and still lifts its head toward heaven, one that keeps going step by step, even when each step feels heavy. It doesn't give you every answer, but it gives you enough strength for the next step. That's the quiet miracle of real faith. Not that your circumstances suddenly change, but that your soul grows stronger in the middle of them. And that strength, that unshakable trust, is what stirs heaven. If you're waiting for your feelings to carry your faith, you'll always be vulnerable to your circumstances. You'll always be at the mercy of what happens around you. But if you root your faith in who God is, unchanging, faithful and good, then you'll find a peace that doesn't make sense, a joy that can't be shaken. You'll stop asking, how do I feel about this? And start declaring, I trust God in this. That shift will change everything. It will move you from reaction to resolve, from worry to worship, from fear to faith. Faith doesn't mean life gets easier. It means you get stronger. It means you carry something inside you that circumstances can't touch. It means your spirit stands even when your heart is tired. That's the kind of faith that changes things, not because it controls outcomes, but because it controls outlook, because it decides, no matter what, I will not be moved. The enemy would love to convince you that real faith is loud, always confident, always joyful. But heaven knows better. Heaven knows that sometimes faith looks like tears in the dark. Sometimes it's saying amen with a broken voice. Sometimes it's crawling forward when your legs won't stand. And heaven is moved not by your volume, but by your endurance. Not by how strong you seem, but by how tightly you cling to the one who is strong when you are not. Faith grows best, not when everything is going right, but when everything is going wrong and you choose to stay anyway. It is in that kind of soil, full of tension, full of questions, full of waiting, that the deepest roots are planted. And once your faith has roots, it won't be swayed by every storm. It won't crumble under pressure. It won't dry up in the desert. It will remain. And more than that, it will rise. So if today you feel weak, if today you're doubting your place, your prayer, your purpose, don't let go. You are closer than you know. The breakthrough you've been praying for may still be hidden, but your faith is building the road that leads to it. Keep showing up, keep praying, keep trusting. Not because the road is easy, but because the one walking with you is worth following. Faith is not a formula. It's not an emotion. It's not a performance. It is a daily yes. It is a quiet anchor. It is the fire that burns, even when everything around you is cold. And one day, when you look back on this season, you won't remember the details of every prayer or the timeline of every breakthrough. You'll remember one thing: you didn't quit. You stayed. And that decision to stay rooted in faith is the reason the promises of God found you right where you were. That is the kind of faith that pleases God. That is the kind of faith that shapes character. That is the kind of faith that changes lives, starting with your own. And that is the kind of faith that will carry you through this moment, into your next, and all the way into the fullness of what God still intends to do. Keep walking, keep trusting. Your faith is working even now. God's plan for your life is not survival, it is transformation. You were not created just to endure hardship, just to make it through another day, barely holding on. That may be where you started, but it is not where heaven intends for you to stay. The storms, the battles, the dark nights, they are not the conclusion. They are the construction site. The breaking is not the end goal. It's the beginning of a rebuilding that exceeds anything you imagined when you first cried out for help. Too many people settle for endurance when God is offering elevation. We pray for rescue, but God answers with resurrection. And resurrection doesn't make old things slightly better. It brings dead things to life. The process is not easy, but it is sacred. It is holy, and it will change you when you submit your brokenness to God. He does not hand it back patched with tape. He takes it into his hands and forms something new, something unrecognizable to your past self, something radiant with purpose, something completely aligned with who he originally designed you to be. I've often compared it to the work done on a house. At first, you think the repairs are simple. A few cracks sealed, some leaks patched, maybe a fresh coat of paint to clean up what time has worn down. That's how most of us approach change. We want spiritual renovations that look good on the surface, but don't require too much discomfort. But when God steps in, he doesn't come as a handyman. He comes as an architect, and he doesn't just touch the surface. He tears through walls. He digs deep into the foundation. He begins building towers, extensions, and staircases that take you places you never asked for, but deeply needed. You stand in the rubble and wonder why it hurts so much more now than it did before. Why things feel messier after the prayer than they did before the surrender. But that's because God isn't interested in just fixing what was. He's interested in creating something entirely new, and creation, true spiritual construction, is messy. It interrupts everything. It disorients what you thought was secure. But that disorientation is the space where God lays the cornerstone of a new identity, one not built on past pain or shallow self-perception, but on his unshakable truth. Transformation is disruptive. It shakes loose what can't go with you into your next chapter. We pray for peace, but then wonder why peace tears down relationships, patterns, and comforts that once made us feel safe. We ask for purpose and then feel abandoned when everything misaligned with that purpose begins to fall away. But this isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's not destruction, it's design. When God begins to work, he works from the inside out. He goes deep not to harm you, but to heal what you didn't even know was fractured. This is the difference between surviving and being restored. Survival keeps your head above water. Restoration teaches you how to walk on waves. It equips you with new vision, new language, new authority. It doesn't just protect you from storms, it builds within you the capacity to carry others through them. And yes, that kind of internal change is painful. You'll resist it. You'll question it. But when the dust settles, you will stand in a space built by divine hands, realizing the life you live now is one only heaven could have constructed. God is not interested in small adjustments. He's not committed to incremental upgrades. He's committed to transformation. the kind that leaves no doubt that he was involved, the kind that turns shame into strength, fear into faith, wounds into wisdom, the kind of transformation that cannot be explained by willpower or self-help. It can only be attributed to grace. That is the power of divine restoration. And that's why you feel the tension, because when God rebuilds, He doesn't settle for less than complete. You may have asked God to help you feel a little better, to make the load lighter, but He's doing more than that. He's making you into someone new. He is not raising a slightly improved version of who you were in your lowest place. He is raising a new creation, one that walks in wisdom, one that no longer bows to fear, one that sees not just the storm, but the glory beyond it. The you that rises on the other side of this process will not just be healed. You will be holy. You will be whole. You will be steady, not because of your strength, but because of your surrender. When you begin to see your pain as part of the preparation, when you stop resenting the delay and start recognizing the design, everything shifts. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is God building in me? That shift in perspective changes how you experience every step forward. You no longer chase comfort. You pursue character. You stop living for validation. You live from identity. An identity rooted in Christ is immovable. It's not fragile. It's not easily offended. It knows who it is, even when nothing else is clear. I no longer pray for the easy path. I pray for the path that leads to fullness. Not because I want pain, but because I want purpose. And purpose doesn't grow in soft soil. It grows in pressure. It grows in surrender. It grows in obedience. And that's why your storm, your battle, your heartbreak is not the end. It is the training ground. It is the forge. And when the fire has finished its work, what will emerge will not be a barely surviving version of yourself. What will emerge is a testimony. So when the pressure increases, when everything you thought was stable begins to shake, don't run, don't fear. Remember that it's not falling apart. It's being rebuilt. And what's coming together is not small. It's sacred, it's strong, it's exactly what you need, even if it's nothing like what you expected. You thought you were asking for relief, but God is preparing you for release. You thought you were praying for survival, but God is preparing you for influence. You thought the goal was to get through, but God's vision is to raise you up, not slightly better, entirely new. That is what divine transformation looks like. And that is what God is doing in you even now. Even through the pain, even in the waiting, even in the silence, He has not abandoned the project. He has only just begun. And when the work is done, you'll look back not with regret, but with reverence. Because what He built in you will outlast the storm that once threatened to break you. You are not just being fixed, you are being made new, and that, beloved, is a promise worth trusting. Change from God rarely happens in the way we predict. It doesn't send a calendar invite. It doesn't offer a slow build-up or polite warning. It arrives suddenly, unmistakably, and supernaturally. When heaven moves, it shifts the ground beneath you. Not to scare you, but to establish you in a way that leaves no room for doubt. This new beginning isn't your doing. It's His. And when it happens, it won't look like what you planned. It will look like what only grace could author. That's the divine pattern. The unexpected, the unexplained, the unmistakable. We wait for clarity and God responds with a calling. We long for certainty, and heaven hands us purpose. The shift doesn't ask for permission. It invites transformation. And when it comes, it doesn't tweak a few things on the surface. It rewrites the entire blueprint, because the nature of divine surprises is that they don't simply improve your life, they redefine it. You're not going to get a better version of your old path. You're going to be handed a new identity entirely. This shift is not symbolic, It's spiritual and irreversible. You won't walk away from this season the same. Your name will carry weight that wasn't there before, not because you've earned it, but because heaven has marked you with purpose. There will be a new authority in your voice, a clarity in your vision, and a presence about you that no one can explain, but everyone will notice. This is what happens when God puts His hand on a life, not to polish it, but to repurpose it. What God is preparing to release into your life is not partial, it's complete. It's not about recovering a few things you lost. It's about stepping into something you never dreamed you could carry. A new anointing will flow from places you once felt weak. A new song will rise where there was only silence. And your testimony will no longer be just about how you endured the pain. It will be about what the pain produced in you. You will not only survive what came against you, you will stand in front of it, renewed, transformed, with proof that God is not only a restorer, but a revealer of destiny. Some of you have walked through rejection, so deep, failure so consistent, and silence so loud that you've stopped expecting anything different. You've stopped dreaming. You've settled into a rhythm of just getting by, convinced that maybe this is all there is. But what if that chapter was never meant to define you, only prepare you? What if the delay wasn't punishment but preparation? What if God has been working not in spite of the silence but through it? What if your disappointment has been the staging ground for something that will not just redeem your past, but redefine your future? That's the kind of transformation He specializes in. It doesn't make sense to the mind, but it resonates with the soul that's been aching for something more. That's why it feels unfamiliar. That's why it feels uncomfortable, because it's not a return. It's a rebirth. There is a kind of breakthrough that doesn't announce itself until it breaks the surface. You don't feel it building, you don't track its progress, it just arrives, unexpected, undeniable. And when it does, it's not just a moment, it's a shift, a before and after moment. The people who once doubted you will have no words. The ones who mocked your struggle will witness your elevation. The ones who thought you were finished will watch you flourish, not because you sought revenge, but because you were patient enough to let God do what only He could do. And when He moves in ways that silence critics and awaken faith in those who had nearly given up hope. This is not the season to shrink. It's the season to prepare. Not because you see results yet, but because you sense the rumble of heaven beginning to shift things in your favor. Don't dismiss the unease. Don't ignore the restlessness. These are signs that something holy is on the way. God is breaking old cycles. He's closing old wounds. He's rearranging your surroundings and adjusting your perspective so that when the door opens, you're ready to walk through it not as who you were, but as who you've become. I once said that there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. That wasn't just a hopeful phrase. It was born from experience. From watching God bring beauty from ashes, from watching light break through the thickest darkness, from seeing how surrender leads to the kind of life you didn't even know to ask for. What lies ahead of you is not just a second chance. It's a divine unveiling, and it will not come slowly. It will come suddenly. It will come with glory. You're going to see things shift overnight, not because you forced it, but because you remained faithful. You'll wake up one day, and the weight that has pressed on your chest for years will be gone. You'll walk into rooms you were once excluded from, and find that your name has already been spoken with favor. You'll look at your life and wonder how all the broken pieces became something so complete. That's what divine surprises do. They rearrange everything in a moment and prove that God never forgot a single detail. So get ready for new oil. Get ready for fresh fire. Get ready for open doors that no one can shut. Get ready for the sound of your own voice declaring a testimony so real that others will find hope just hearing it. This is not about being restored to what you once had. This is about becoming someone you never thought you could be. And that change, when it comes, will not just impact you, it will impact every space you touch. It will shift the atmosphere around you because it was birthed in surrender and sealed in obedience. God is not just rewriting your story. He's releasing you into the chapter where all the waiting makes sense. Every delay, every prayer, every tear, none of it was wasted. It was the soil where this moment was planted. And when it begins, it won't be subtle. It will be sudden, and it will be sacred. Because it's not about what you've earned. It's about what He's always planned. A new name, a new identity, a new praise, a new purpose, a new clarity. All wrapped in a glory that says this is only the beginning. So stay open, stay surrendered, stay available, because the thing you thought was taking too long is already closer than you think. It's already taking shape. And when it arrives, it will do more than restore you. It will reveal you. Not the you who barely made it, but the you heaven always knew, the one who was formed for glory. The one who is about to step into everything God has promised. And when that happens, you won't just survive. You'll shine. You'll carry His name, His power and His grace, and everywhere you go, the world will know heaven has moved, and nothing will be the same again. Before we close, take a moment to breathe and center your heart. This next part isn't just a formality. It's a sacred invitation. If you felt the weight of this message stirring something inside you, if the storms have left you weary, uncertain, or searching for hope, this prayer is for you. It's not about having all the answers. It's about bringing your questions, your pain, your hopes, just as they are, to the one who already knows and still chooses to love you. As we speak these words together, believe that something is shifting. Now with faith, step into this moment of prayer. Father in heaven, I speak now with a heart fully aware that many listening are standing at the edge of something they cannot yet name. Their eyes have seen disappointment, their hearts have known weariness, and their hands may be empty from what life has taken. But I also know with every fiber of my spirit that you are not silent and you are not absent. You are the God who moves in unseen ways. You are the one who still parts seas, still raises what is dead, still rebuilds what has been shattered. So today we ask not for what is ordinary. We ask for the supernatural, for your hand to stretch beyond what we can reach and do what only you can do. Wherever sorrow has settled into the soul, I ask you to pour out joy, not the kind tied to circumstances, but the kind that wells up from within, rooted in your presence. Exchange mourning for laughter. Replace anxiety with peace that passes all understanding. Speak to the brokenhearted and tell them that their tears have not been wasted, that every cry in the night was heard, that every ache in silence was known, and that even now you are writing redemption into their story. For those who have lost, whether it's years, opportunities, relationships, or strength, I call on you to restore, not simply return what was taken, but bring it back in a greater measure. Redeem time, redeem hope, redeem identity. Show them that nothing surrendered to you ever stays in the grave, that your power is not limited by time or circumstance, that in your economy what is given up is never truly gone. It's being refined, multiplied, and returned in a form more beautiful than it left. Speak life into every area that has felt lifeless, into every space that has been buried beneath shame, regret, or fear. Take the pain and shape it into testimony. Use what once broke them to build others. Make every wound a window through which your glory shines. May their story not just be one of endurance, but of transformation, proof that the fire did not consume them, it consecrated them, and that their scars are not signs of weakness, but symbols of survival marked by your healing grace. I ask that you begin something new today, a divine beginning, a holy reset, not just a new season, but a new spirit within. Stir up fresh vision. Breathe new purpose. Plant dreams where disappointment tried to root despair. Speak clearly to hearts that have been confused. Confirm callings that once felt uncertain. Establish their steps, not based on what they feel, but on who you are. You are faithful. You are constant. You are the same yesterday, today, and forever. And you are with them now. Break every chain that still clings to their identity. Every lie whispered by the enemy. Every label placed by the past. Every limitation born from pain. Remove it. Replace it with truth. Speak identity into their soul. Call them by their real name. They are not forgotten. They are not disqualified. They are not too late. They are chosen, called, loved, and appointed for such a time as this. Let that truth take root, deeper than any doubt has ever gone. Empower them to walk differently from this day forward, not in fear, but in boldness, not in shame, but in the light of grace. Let their lives become living evidence that your word never returns void. That when you begin a good work, you bring it to completion. That nothing surrendered to you is ever lost, and nothing is too broken for you to use. Pour out favor on their journey. Surround them with the right voices. Bring divine connection, clarity in decisions. Strengthen weakness and joy in every small step. Remind them daily that they are not walking alone, but walking with the God who knows the end from the beginning and has never once made a mistake in their story. And so I pray with full confidence, not in what we can do, but in who you are, that what comes next will be greater than what was, that you will open doors no man can shut, close doors that lead to harm, and lead them through valleys into wide open spaces of promise, not because they've earned it, but because you are good, not because they're strong, but because you are enough. This is not the end. This is not a season to merely survive. This is the moment of rising, the moment of rebuilding, the moment where ashes turn into beauty and sorrow turns into strength. I declare that they will not just live, they will thrive. They will not just get through, they will rise above, not just surviving but soaring, not just holding on but walking forward in bold, unshakable faith. In this holy moment, I stand in agreement with every heart that dares to believe again. This is the beginning of something new, and it will not be small. It will not be shallow. It will not be ordinary. It will be the kind of testimony that turns heads, lifts others, and brings glory to your name. Amen. You are stronger than you think. Not because of what you've survived, but because of who is walking with you through it. What you've faced may have been fierce, but the strength within you, the Spirit sustaining you, is greater still. So keep moving forward, keep holding on, keep trusting even when it feels hard. You were not built to break, you were chosen to overcome. This journey of faith is not about perfection, it's about perseverance. It's about believing that God is still working, even in silence, even in shadows. Everything shared today points to one truth. Your storm is not the end. It's the beginning, a beginning where your sorrow becomes strength, your wounds become testimony, and your waiting becomes breakthrough. You're stepping into a season of renewal, not just in what you do, but in who you are becoming. So don't stop now, don't look back. The best is not behind you. The best is unfolding ahead. Walk by faith, speak with boldness, and live with the confidence that you are already equipped for the victory that is coming. You are not just passing through, you are being prepared to rise. If this message has touched your spirit, if something inside you is awakening, take a moment to respond. Tap the like button to let us know you're walking this journey with us. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button so you never miss what's next. And we want to hear from you. Drop a 777 in the comments below as your declaration of faith and your commitment to keep going. This is more than a video, it's a community, a space where faith is deepened, purpose is rediscovered, and lives are transformed. Join us as we grow together, explore what it means to live with intention and experience how God is working in every detail of our stories. You're not alone. You're part of something bigger, and the best is truly yet to come.